Chapter 376. The Chosen, Part 2. The Jews were treated by the Church and many Christians as Christ killers and cursed people, and hence persecuted throughout the centuries. The Black Death, which claimed the lives of 30 millions, and 500 millions worldwide, was blamed on the Jews. Their dietary customs of washing hands before eating saved them from the outbreak. They were accused of having secret pact with the devil. Satan was protecting them, and they were paying him back by poisoning the wells of water of the Christians. Many of them were put to death under this false accusation. In Spain, Jewish children were taken from their parents and given to Christian families to raise them up as Christians. Jews were given two options, either to convert to Christianity or leave Spain. Thousands of them left Spain and settled in North Africa. Those who agreed to convert were accused of being pretenders and tortured to death through the notorious Spanish Inquisition. While they were on their way to the Holy Land to free it from the Muslims, the Crusaders said, "Why we should wait until we reach there to kill the infidels? We have infidels here in Europe." Then, they killed thousands of European Jews. Several times, Jews were baptized against their wishes and forced to convert to Christianity. In Russia, Jews were forced to serve 25 years in Russian army. Many countries forbade Jews to work, and hence they were compelled to lend money for usury. They were persecuted for being money lenders. They were forced to live in ghettos. A ghetto is a part of a city in which members of a minority group live, especially because of social, legal, or economic pressure. The term was originally used in Venice to describe the part of the city to which Jews were restricted and segregated. In 1902 to 1903, in Russia a forged document appeared, which was called, the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. It included a Jewish conspiracy supposedly drafted by the Elders of Zion, teaching Jews everywhere how to take over the world, take control of the media and the financial institutions, change the traditional social order, etc. It was the first known conspiracy theory in the world. The first Russian investigation came to the conclusion that the protocols first appeared in Paris in anti-Semitic circles around 1897–1898. The same document was later on reproduced by the secret police of France and used against the French Jews. It had been translated in all major languages in Europe and used in many European cities as anti-Semitic means to persecute Jews and expel them from many countries. A translation made by an Arab Christian appeared in Cairo in 1927, this time as a book. The first translation by an Arab Muslim was also published in Cairo, but only in 1951. Perhaps, the most classical example of the anti-Semitism was the legend of the Wandering Jew, also called the Eternal Jew. This legend was produced in thousands of works of literature in all countries of Europe, from Russia to Spain. It had been believed by millions as a true story. The Wandering Jew or the Eternal Jew was a medieval legend about a Jew who refused to give Jesus water or did not allow him to lean on his wall, while Christ was carrying his cross, on his way to the Golgotha. As punishment for his sin, this Jew was condemned by God to eternal restless wandering and suffering until the second return of Christ. Everyone wishes to have a long life, but a happy long life. But, this Jew was condemned to a long life of continuous suffering and continuous restless wandering. This legend appeared in European literature and folklore tales in many different versions. Many names and identifications were attributed to this wandering eternal Jew. He was known as Ahasverus or Butatius. He was identified as a shoemaker in Jerusalem at the time of Jesus. He was also identified as a shadow, the Antichrist, or a beggar, as Cain or the sacred executioner. Many religious leaders and ordinary people claimed to have sighted Ahasverus from far or had a real encounter with him. He walks in lonely places, jungles, valleys, mountains, desert, highways, haunted places, and the like. He appears to people as a ghost, a shadow, an old man, and warns them about the sin of unbelief. An American bishop visited Europe and claimed to have seen the Eternal Jew, and the legend traveled with him to the States. In European folk belief which associates Ahasverus' appearance in a certain locality with wars, plagues and ultimately with the Last Judgment and the Second Coming of Christ. There are no morals behind this legend except that it is a creation of a fictional figure about anti-Semitism against the Jews. It depicted the Jews as cursed, condemned, and wandering people on earth. This belief persisted until the present time. The culmination of anti-Semitism reached its height in the Nazi Germany under the greatest tyrant of human history, Adolf Hitler. He said in his book, Mein Kampf, the personification of the devil as the symbol of all evil assumes the living shape of the Jew. And so he the Jew advances on his fatal road until another force comes forth to oppose him, and in a mighty struggle hurls the heaven stormer back to Lucifer. Germany is today the next great war aim of Bolshevism. It requires all the force of a young missionary idea to raise our people up again, to free them from the snares of this international serpent. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf. Hence today I believe that I am acting in accordance with the will of the Almighty Creator. By defending myself against the Jew, I am fighting for the work of the Lord. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf. Hitler wrote his book when he was in prison. When he came to power he attempted to destroy an entire human race, the Jews. He was influenced by anti-Semitism which was already 2,000 years old. It was like snowball that kept rolling for centuries until it reached its zenith in the Nazi Germany Holocaust, which led to the mass murder or genocide of 6 million Jews, of whom 1.5 million Jewish children and 2 million Jewish women. A network of over 40,000 facilities in Germany and German-occupied territories were used to concentrate, hold, and kill the Jews. Hitler thought that he was acting according to the will of God. Today, the new Nazi Germany is Iran, and the new Hitler and his Nazis are the Iranian leaders who vowed to wipe Israel from the world's map. This also is included in the second article of the Palestinian Hamas Constitution. They want to drive all the Jews into the Mediterranean Sea. Their prophet Muhammad promised them that the last hour will not come until Muslims will kill all the Jews. Abu Hurairah reported Allah's Messenger, may peace be upon him, as saying, the last hour would not come unless the Muslims will fight against the Jews, and the Muslims would kill them until the Jews would hide themselves behind a stone or a tree, and a stone or a tree would say, Muslim, O the servant of Allah, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him, but the tree Garkad would not say, for it is the tree of the Jews. Sahih al-Bukhari, Book 41, Hadith number 6985. I heard Allah's apostle saying, the Jews will fight with you, and you will be given victory over them, so that a stone will say, O Muslim, there is a Jew behind me, kill him. Sahih al-Bukhari, Hadith 4, 56, 791. Anti-Semitism in Islam. The Quran and Hadiths of Prophet Muhammad from A to Z without exaggeration are anti-Semitic religious texts. You can't be a true Muslim if you don't hate the Jews and curse them day and night and strive hard to kill them. According to the teachings of Islam, the Jews are debased, cursed, anathematized forever by God, and so they can never repent and be forgiven. They are cheats and traitors, defiant and stubborn, prophet killers, liars who falsify the scripture and take bribes, ritually unclean infidels, with a foul odor emanating from them. In classical Islam, the image of the Jew is derogatory and malevolent. The Quran and Hadith state that some Jews were cursed by God and turned into apes, pigs, and rats. And well ye knew those amongst you children of Israel who transgressed in the matter of the Sabbath, we said to them, be ye apes, despised and rejected. Quran, Surah 2, 65. Say, shall I inform you of what is worse than that as penalty from Allah? It is that of those, i.e., the Jews, whom Allah has cursed and with whom he became angry and made of them apes and pigs and slaves of Tagut, Satan. Those are worse in position and further astray from the sound way. Quran, Surah 5, 60. The Prophet said, a group of Israelites were lost. Nobody knows what they did. But I do not see them except that they were cursed and changed into rats. Sahih al-Bukhari, Hadith 4, 54, 524. Anti-Semitism in Islam is a vast topic, it needs a separate chapter to expose it in detail. Since this chapter focuses on anti-Semitism among Christians, in later chapter we will discuss the verses of the Quran and the hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad, which incite hatred and command the killing of the people of the book, Jews and Christians. The late Pope of the Coptic Church, Shenouda III, refused to visit Israel until he died. He forbade all the Coptic Christians of Egypt to visit Israel or support the Jews. Here are some extracts from the many anti-Semitic remarks by the Pope Shenouda. From the Arabic national point, we should not abandon our Palestinian brothers and our Arabic brothers by normalizing our relations with the Jews. From the church point of view, Copts who go to Jerusalem betray their church. The Pope Shenouda also said, do not believe their claims that they are God's chosen people, because it is not true. He also said during his weekly sermon on Wednesday evening at the papal residence in Abbasiyah, Jews are a people that God has cursed. The Pope Shenouda called the Jews Christ killers. And, in July 2008, he told Egypt's Al-Aram newspaper, Jews are accursed people who have their hands indulged in the blood of Palestinians. He also forbade all Copts from visiting Jerusalem as long as it remains occupied, meaning as long as there are Jews in it. Shenouda said that he had spoken earlier with former U.S. President Jimmy Carter, and explained to him that Jews were called God's chosen people because they were the only worshippers on earth, while the rest of its inhabitants were pagans. Once billions believed in the existence of God, the Jews no longer were God's chosen people, he said, and now all those who believe in God and have true faith are God's chosen people. According to a translation of an interview with the Egyptian Coptic Patriarch Shenouda III, provided by the Middle East Media Research Institute, MEMRI, the Coptic leader told an interviewer on Egyptian TV that the Vatican was wrong to apologize for long-time church teachings about Jews as Christ killers. But, the Pope Shenouda is not the first to incite Coptic violence against Jews. In fact, the Copts were not only extremely anti-Semitic, as they continue to be, but they often led the Muslims in pogroms against the Jews of Egypt. There are almost no Jews left in Egypt today, and the Copts joined the Muslims in calling for the Jews' expulsion. Many Jewish homes and property were taken not by Muslims, but by Copts. George Saliba, the Maronite Syriac Orthodox Church's bishop in Lebanon, in an interview with Al Dunya TV, he declared that the source, behind all these movements, all these civil wars, and all these evils in the Arab world is nothing other than Zionism, deeply rooted in Judaism. The Jews, he says, are responsible for financing and inciting the turmoil in accordance with the protocols of the elders of Zion. After the Islamic terrorist attack on the Syriac Catholic Our Lady of Salvation Church in Baghdad, leaving 58 dead and 67 wounded in the worst attack on the Iraqi Christian community since 2003. The Iraqi Melkite Greek Patriarch Gregory III Layam characterized the terrorist attacks on Iraq's Christians as part of a Zionist conspiracy against Islam. He further affirmed, all this behavior has nothing to do with Islam, but it is actually a conspiracy planned by Zionism, and it aims at undermining and giving a bad image of Islam. He then said the massacre is also a conspiracy against Arabs and the predominantly Muslim Arab world that aims at depicting Arabs and Muslims in Arab countries as terrorists and fundamentalist murderers in order to deny them their rights, and especially those of the Palestinians. In an interview with NBN TV on November 9, 2010, Iraqi priest Father Suhail Kasha claimed that the Jews consider all Gentiles to be beasts, and asserted that the real danger to Middle Eastern Christians came from Zionism. He went on to state that those who perpetrated the attack on the church in Baghdad were certainly not Muslims, but probably those trained and supervised by global Zionism. The Abrahamic covenant, God called Abraham and said to him, "And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you, and make your name great, and so you shall be a blessing, and I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth will be blessed." Genesis 12, 2-3. The blessings in these two verses are promised to those who bless the Jews, the great nation that came from Abraham, and the curses to those who curse the Jews. I believe that all Arab Christians who hate the Jews and refuse to support Israel are going against God's will and incurring the curses of Genesis 12:3. In fact, to hate the Jews is equal to hating God. God has blessed the United States of America and made it the greatest country in the world because it is supporting Israel, and when the Jews got persecuted and killed in Europe, America took them in and gave them safe refuge. Today, the center of all world's activities have been the nation of Israel. The Jewish nation was attempted destruction by Nazi Germany, Haman of Persia, the Book of Esther, and Pharaoh of Egypt, the Book of Exodus. They were dispersed by the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and by the Romans in 70 AD and 134 AD, but still they survived and returned. 3 times, they had been out of their promised land, and 3 times they returned to it. Once a Jew was told, "You are the chosen people," he said, "I wish he chose somebody else." This is because no other people were so persecuted as the Jews. Until 2000, there are 663 Nobel Prize winners, 140 of them are Jews. The global Jewish population is approximately 14 million, or about 0.02% of the world's population. As of 2013, 193 Nobel Prize winners are Jews. The global Islamic population is approximately 1.2 billion, or roughly 20% of the world's population. As of 2013, 14 Nobel Prize recipients are Muslims. Times magazine put the top 20 people in the world, 60% of them are Jews. 30% of the Supreme Court in America are Jews. 13% of law colleges professors in America are Jews. Of college-age Jews, 80% are in college. 60% of all top Hollywood positions are held by Jews. 40% of New York's lawyers are Jews. 10% of U.S. colleges professors are Jews. 23% of the wealthiest people in America are Jews. 20% of the wealthiest people in Canada are Jews. Mark Twain once said, "All things are mortal except the Jew." Frederick the Great of Russia asked his court chaplain to prove the inerrancy of the Bible. He said, "One word, sir: Israel." By watching the Jews you can see what God is doing. 64 of the Bible's 66 books were written by Jews except for 2 which were written by a single Gentile, Luke, the Gospel of Luke and the Book of Acts. We, Christians, hold in our hands a Jewish book. This is the nation that given us the 10 Commandments, the finished law of God. The incarnation of God into humanity came to us through the descendant of David, a Jew. The Western civilization is shaped and developed through the Bible. No nation in the entire world has come remotely close to the Jewish nation. The beginning of this nation is Genesis 12:1-3. It is the foundation on which everything else is built. God called a barren man and a barren woman. Out of the dead womb of Sarah he created this miracle nation. All Jews traced their origin to one single man, Abraham. Genesis 12:1-3 is called the Abrahamic covenant. God gave by oath to Abraham this nation. God swears that this covenant will be done. In verse 1, he promised to give him a land, the land of Canaan, the present day, the land of Israel. In verse 2, he promised him a son and that his son will found a great nation. In verse 3, he commanded him to be a blessing to all the families of the earth. Through his seed, Christ, the whole world is going to be blessed. Now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will shew thee, and I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing, and I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. Genesis 12:1-3. From this nation came the knowledge of God's law, redemption, Bible, and reality of life. This nation is blessed with an everlasting blessing, given a land forever, and became a vehicle for a universal blessing for the entire world. The Apostle Paul said, "For the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable," Romans 11:29. Israel has never and it will never be a cursed nation. To call the Jews a cursed people is blasphemy. To hate that nation is to hate God, and to love that nation is to love God.